Christmas, the season of trees, decorations, and gifts. The season of Christ's birth and the promise of salvation for His people. Since the Old Testament prophecies of the Messiah's birth, then the second advent and the return of Christ, His children have been waiting. Waiting on God should not be frustrating or discouraging. Waiting on God should be full of expectation and hope. Let's join Pastor Jeremy for this installment of The Gift is Waiting, Hope Realized.
Hey, thanks for making it out, man. The real Northerners are here today, right? So give yourselves a hand. Way to go. Well, Northerners, real Northerners, yes. I won't make any comment about those who stayed home. We'll just let them be. I was thinking about this Christmas season and the whole theme of darkness and light. And how many of you have ever been down in a mine? Have you ever been in a mine? Okay, so a lot of you. It's mining country. I remember the first time that I ended up down in a mine, and after suiting all up and doing everything you have to do, we were all walking, and the gentleman that was giving us the tour, he said, just hang on a minute, and whatever he did, he shut off every light in the area that we were in. Now, I have no words to explain what happened next, because he said, please touch your nose. Now, you know where your nose is, right? I know where my nose is. My nose has been there for the last 69 years and change. And you know something? I couldn't find my nose in the dark. If you have never been in utter blackness, there's no reference to light whatsoever, to be in such blackness, you can't find your nose. And when we look at the whole concept of this Christmas season, it's really dark for some people. This is not always the best time of year. For some of you, it's great. You love it. You love the chaos. You love spending the money. You love decorating the trees. But there's a lot of people that really struggle. And especially, this year, for some of you, you've lost a loved one this year. It'll be the first year that you're without them. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's the 20th year you're without them or the 30th year. When Christmas comes by, there's still that little nagging part in your spirit. And I asked myself a question I couldn't answer. And maybe you have an answer in your mind for it, but I really struggled to find words to say, what is the emotion of darkness? I know what darkness is. I know what it is physically, and I've experienced that down in the mind. But what are the emotions that come with being in a dark place or a dark time? And I thought maybe, for me, maybe sadness, maybe a bit of depression. I'm not sure what all of those things that go with it. But I do know one thing, that when we are dark emotionally, there really is in our lives an absence of hope. And that's really something that really seems to connect. That when things are dark and things are difficult and things are discouraging and things aren't going the way you want them to go, and you feel a little bit depressed or a little bit down, or maybe you get like me, I get a little bit of a seasonally affected disorder. They call it sad disease. And you get just a little bit melancholy. Oftentimes what fades in us is hope. So imagine for a moment if you have a whole nation that is living in darkness or without hope. And really the whole Christmas story focuses around this nation of Israel 700 years before the birth of Christ. And they were living in tremendous darkness. And into that darkness, there is a prophet by the name of Isaiah. And Isaiah would write a prophecy that's turned out to be one of the most famous prophecies about Christ. And you find it in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 1. And he says this, and remember now, he's 700 years before the birth of Christ. Nevertheless, there'll be no more gloom for those who are in distress. Well, there's a good emotion, eh? Gloom. I don't know, how do you do gloom? Gloom is an interesting emotion. Anybody know how to do gloom? Well, gloom. There'll be no more gloom for those who are in distress. So in the past, he humbled the land of Nebulun and the land of Naphtali. Those are two places where the children of Israel lived. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, We'll just keep going. And then he says this, listen, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of what kind of darkness? Deep darkness. The light has dawned. And then he says in verse 3, you have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. And I like this verse 4. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you've scattered the yoke. So there's another way to look at darkness, being yoked to darkness. That's what you put on two oxen to make them work together. You tie them together. That burdens them. And the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, has been broken. Verse 5. I love this verse. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. Remember, this is a prophecy of the future. And then he says these words. Would you read them with me, please? For unto us a child is born. To us a son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. And we're just going to stop right there. See, so there's this great prophecy that we all know. And it was said 700 years before it came true that what was going to happen was a baby was going to be born and into the world light would come. So I want to focus today on verse 2 of that text, Isaiah 9. And he says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those on the land of the living, the deep darkness, a light has dawned. And you thought, what is it like to walk in the dark? What is it like to walk in the dark? And you think about that for a moment, right? Like you're pretty unsure, right? If you're walking in the dark. I know walking through South Mine there where we were in the dark, I mean, everybody is just kind of shuffling your feet along. You don't want to take too big a step because you don't want to be foolish and end up in a hole. And you're walking in the dark, and everything in the dark is exaggerated, right? Like even though it's dark and you can't see, all of a sudden your hearing becomes very acute. And you hear everything that's there. The other thing that happens is if you can't see, you begin to imagine what's there, right? You begin to just, I got to begin to think of something. I got to see something so I imagine it, that it's there. Whether it's real or not, it's imagined. So now think of a whole nation walking in darkness. A whole nation not knowing where it's going. A whole nation stumbling along. A whole nation robbed of hope. And that was the nation of Israel, in which this prophet Isaiah spoke that prophecy that we know so well. For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given. So, how much light does it take to dispel darkness? So, do you remember June of last year? Some of you remember June, July last year. There were 12, I believe it was, young men, soccer players, trapped in a cave for 18 days. And for 18 days, there was not one ray of light in that cave. They were in absolute darkness for 18 days. Can you even imagine it? Can you even imagine what it must have been like when the cave animals came by, the bats? Whew, and it's dark and you can't see. And I wonder what else was in the cave. I wonder the smell. They could probably smell fungus. They could smell the dampness. And their other senses would become so keen. But for 18 days, they say that their heart rate began to reduce. They began to breathe much more shallowly. The oxygen began to diminish in the cave, and they're in darkness. Now, can you just imagine when that first diver popped his head up out of that water into that cave, and he probably had a tiniest little light on his forehead? What it's like for them to suddenly see light. See, here, it's hope, right? Like light always brings hope. And the amazing thing about this is it doesn't take very much light in a dark place to bring hope. It only takes the tiniest flicker, the tiniest candle, the tiniest thing. And Jesus says to you and to me that we are the light of the world. And sometimes, you say, I don't think my light shines very bright. I don't think I have much to offer. And yet, if you think of darkness and you think of light, it only takes the tiniest, littlest, smallest, little tiny flicker of a candle to illuminate darkness. Jesus would say this in Matthew 5 and verse 14. You are the light of the world. Just turn to somebody and say, you're a light. You're a light. You are the light of the world. Listen, a town built on a hill cannot be hidden. I was driving in from Manitoulin last night in the fog and the mist. And I looked around and I thought, why is it so bright in the fog and the mist? And I realized it was the ambient light from Sudbury and all around Sudbury bouncing off the fog, bringing illumination. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. And then he says this, neither do people put a light, I can't read today. People put light, a lamp. What is that? Neither do people light a lamp. I'll read the big screen. And put it under a bowl. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Here up. Instead, they put it on a stand. And it gives light to everyone in the house. So then Jesus explains in verse 16. In the same way, he says, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So what does it mean for you and I then to be light at this season, at this time of year? And the first thing I think it is to be sensitive that this is just not the best time of year for everybody. Just to be sensitive. I mean, I went through a period of my life in which I was depressed. Has anybody been through like a real depression, like a clinical depression? Yeah, I went through a period many years ago. And you know what annoyed me most? Happy people. Oh my gosh. Would you just shut up? And then people would tell me story about their kids, right? Oh, our kids are doing this and our kids, I don't want to hear about your kids. I don't want to hear about the good time. I just want to leave me in my darkness so I can wallow and suck my thumb and be sorry for myself. Because that's the way I felt. So sometimes I'm not saying to us, don't have Christmas celebrations. I mean, we decorated the church. Thank you to Kelly and her team. We've decorated outside. We're playing Christmas music. We're going to have a good time. But sometimes it just requires us to listen carefully to where people are at. Because there's nothing harder than faking happiness or joy when you don't feel it. I mean, it's really hard to do. And yet people around you, they want to, hey, what are you getting for Christmas? What are you buying? Sometimes you just want to say to them, could you just go away? Just go away into your hole. And so, I think if we really want to be light, we can be light by being sensitive. The other thing I think it means, the way in which we can be light, is to be present for people. Just to be available to them. I mean, I know we do lots of things, right? I mean, we got mittens. We've got 5,000 mittens to give out, and we need your help, really. If you can go to the events booth and sign up this week to help distribute mittens somehow, they'll tell you what you can do. If you can sort and bag, because we got 5,000 of them we got to get rid of, and we got to get little kids' hands warm because winter came early. So yeah, you can give mittens, but you could also give your time to help sort mittens. And we already had shoe boxes that we've given out, and we're buying gifts. We've done big brothers, big sisters, and we've got backpacks, and we've done all of that. And the giving is great, and the fact that you've got some money to give is awesome. But ultimately, the greatest act of light is really the gift of yourself. You see, the concept of generosity, when you think about it, when God was generous, he gave himself. Because that's who Jesus was, Emmanuel, God with us. And the real gift of generosity is one of the things that we give the most of, and probably the most valuable currency in today's world is the gift of time. I mean, when you think about it, sometimes it's easier for me to throw $100 at something. It's easier to go buy a $100 gift or a $50 gift or a $20 gift. Here, have this. But the real act of generosity, I mean, when God gave, he humbled himself. It says he made himself of no reputation, and he was born as a little baby, a tiny little helpless baby. And he was in the darkness of the womb for those 9 months, and he had to trust that Mary would eat right and exercise right and look after him in there. And then when he was born, there he was helpless, crying. And really what he did was he gave the gift of himself all the way to a cross, and ended up dying on a cross for you and for me, that we would know life now and know what it is not to live in a daily hell of our own existence. And he gives himself. And so when we talk about generosity at Christmas, I want you to give to the Christmas offering. Please do that. I want you to buy stuff. I want you to do things like that. But in the event you can't do any of that, you can find a way to give yourself. And even if you do give money, if you do buy gifts, I still don't think that lets you off the hook from giving yourself. You see, it's really hard to hope again for some people. When we read that prophecy in Isaiah 9 and 6, 700 years before it came true, he said, "For unto us a child is," what's the word? Born. Unto us a child is born. And then this great prophecy that still, all of it has not come true even today. To us a son is given. The government will be on his shoulders, and he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. But the amazing thing there is that for hope to come to the nation of Israel, it required a child to be born. And for hope to come in our lives, again, it requires that something be birthed in us. I love the story of Mary, Luke chapter 1 and verse 30. I love it when the angels appear. I love to play with that thing of angels, because I can't imagine what it would be like to suddenly have some form of being appear before you out of nowhere and know that you weren't smoking weed. It's like, what? And of course he says, "Don't be afraid." He said, "Mary, you found favor with God." The next verse he says, "For you will conceive and what? And give birth to a son. And you're to call his name Jesus." You see, sometimes we think that hope needs to come from outside of us. And yet really hope is an inside job. Hope is an inside job when the gift that Christ has given to us, the gift of hope, is birthed in us. When we look and we say, you know what? I need something more than what I've got right now. I need something more than just me. There's got to be something more to this world than just what I do. And when I look up at the gift that God gave through his son, Jesus Christ, when I look at that gift of hope and I look at that gift of generosity, that gift needs to be birthed in me today. Needs to happen from within me. So this Christmas season, as we look around and as we look at each other, I think it's really better to wait in the darkness with hope than to wait in the darkness with despair. And I think the thing that changes darkness to light and despair into hope is the whole idea that we would practice generosity of ourselves. There's a story told about a little girl, 5 years old. Tough times in the family. And the family had this very special gold wrapping paper. I don't know if you've ever seen any like that. I don't know if people still use it, but gold foil wrapping paper. In its day, it was extremely expensive. And Dad looked up one day and suddenly discovered the roll of wrapping paper was gone, and he knew that his daughter had taken it, and he was incensed and angry and upset because he didn't have any more money to buy gold wrapping paper, and he disciplined the little girl, and the next thing he looks under the tree and he finds a box, gold, wrapped like this, and he thinks, oh, that's what she's done with it. And then he thought, I wonder, okay, thank you, God. That'll help an illustration, won't it? And he thinks, I wonder where she got the money to buy the gift, because she doesn't have any money. And on Christmas morning, she got up and she ran underneath the tree and she handed the box to her dad, and her dad was so proud. He thought of it. He thought, isn't this awesome? And he opened the box and it was empty. And he was so angry. He thought she wasted her paper on the empty box. He said to her, why did you give me an empty box? And she said, Daddy, it's not empty. She said, I blew kisses into the box until it was full. See, I think you and I all have an invisible gold box filled with kisses, filled with love, filled with hope. And I think sometimes what we need to do is we just need to open our box of kisses. Those kind words that people have said to us, those situations that bring us joy, those things that bring us peace and hope. And maybe we need to take out some of those kisses and just kiss other people with them. Maybe we just need to take some time and just be with people. Wouldn't it be kind of great to just slow your calendar down a little bit for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks? Wouldn't it be nice to schedule some time in with people to have a coffee? Or maybe to go and have a visit. You see, while you're waiting for light to shine in your life, you and I can shine our light in other people's lives. See, when you're in darkness, one of the things that happens is you don't think you have any hope. But that's not true. When you're living in darkness, you don't think that it's ever going to change, but that's not true. You know, when you allow your mind to become clouded and dark and full of despair and hopelessness, you think that that's the way life will be forever, but that's not true, because you have a box just like this. And when you open it, you'll find memories. You'll find stories. You'll find things that'll make you laugh and make you cry. And I think our goal at Christmas is, after we open our own box and we think of all the wonders and the kisses that have been blown into that box by the people that we know and we love, and the people that have influenced our lives, and the people that have walked difficult miles with us, and the people that have been there for us when we couldn't be there for ourselves, then it's our turn to give someone else a box. It's our turn to kiss someone else with hope. Today, as we look at this marvelous, marvelous, marvelous Christmas season, today as we think about its complexity and how we're going to approach this coming season, let's approach the season with generosity. But let's approach it with the generosity of ourselves, in the same way that God has been generous to us through giving himself to us. Would you pray with me? Today, Lord, as we wait with patience and as we practice generosity, hope can be born again in us. Lord, while we celebrate may we be very aware of the struggle around us. And Lord, when we feel we've got nothing to offer and nothing to give, Father, may you remind us that we can always give of ourselves. And the greatest gift that we can give to anyone is the gift of our time. So Lord, if money is tight and we think that we can't participate in the Christmas the way the world participates in it, Lord, they can keep their Christmas. They can keep the tinsel. They can keep the presents. They can keep the commercialism. They can keep the debt. For Lord, this Christmas, what we want to give is the priceless gift, the gift of ourselves. In your name we pray. Amen. I'd love you to join in communion with me today. And as we join in communion, we use these little cups, so if you're new with us today, you can get them at the end of an aisle. And I know there's so many of you that tuned in by radio this morning or watching online and didn't want to risk the weather. So could I just encourage you to be a part of what we're doing today? So could you grab maybe that coffee you've got and that bagel or a slice of toast or cracker, or that orange juice? And how about we just make it holy today? And I'll ask you to join with me in communion. I have very, very mixed feelings about Christmas. You know, I love the decorations, and I love the gifts, but oh, I struggle with the chaos. I struggle with it. So today, the message that you heard was really a message for me, born out of the fact that I believe that when God gave, he gave himself. And here, it's right here. You hold it in your hand. The gift of God himself. A broken body and shed blood. Sometimes it's difficult to give ourselves. Sometimes it takes a risk to go and see someone we haven't seen in a long time. Sometimes it takes a risk to go and talk to that person that maybe we're not getting along with all that well. Sometimes it's a risk to say, I forgive you, or I'm sorry. Sometimes it's just a risk to knock on someone's door and maybe be rejected. But whatever risk God is calling you to take at this Christmas season, with who you are and what you need to do with you, your own life, think of the risk that Jesus took for us. Think of that risk. On the night that he was betrayed, he broke bread and he gave thanks. He said, this is my broken body. Here it is. My body broken for you. He says, remember me when you do this. Remember my incredible gift of generosity, that you might be forgiven, that you might experience a quality of life now that's not like any other, because the Spirit of the risen Lord can come and live in you and bring you new life. Would you eat together? And after supper, he took the cup. He said, this is the New Testament, this is the new agreement, or the new deal, in my blood. And he said, do this in remembrance of me, and then he added these words, until I come again. And so we look at the great prophecy, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, the government will be upon his shoulders, his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And we realize that while Jesus was born At that time in Bethlehem, that part of the prophecy has been fulfilled, but the other part is still waiting. And our great hope is that one day Christ will return and finish the work of his kingdom that you and I are to do now. See, our kingdom work is to bring hope into our families, hope into our marriages, hope into our businesses, hope into the people around us, hope into the communities in which we live. That's our job. And one of the ways we do that is by being generous with ourselves. Would you drink, please, in Jesus' name?